This video will cover the origin story of Eternal Return. The organization Aglia and its experimentation did not actually start on Lumia Island. The first canonical research record of the organization came in 1917, said to have existed for decades before. This unnamed group of scientific minds made the discovery of being able to manipulate the process of fertilization and take the first step towards creating the perfect human from birth. In Earth's history, World War I is what was happening during this time of year, which for Eternal Return's universe made finding a supply of human test subjects easy to come by. 11 years passed, and what had come about in these years was 6 positive human test subjects, successfully born out of their manipulated births. A significance to the group, since the failure data was 158 human test subjects that were unaffected and grew as regular human beings, with typical human cell growth. The 6 that were said to have immortal bodies showed their cells regenerated at a rate 100 times faster than an ordinary human. While this next sentence isn't official, I believe that these 6 were not disclosed of their own immortal potential, but instead regarded as a special few. This theory is supported by canon records that follow. A critical piece of info is discovered as one of the 6 test subjects had shot themselves in the head. When the group cleaned and removed the shrapnel fragments from the person, the suicidal subject did not recover to the same mental state, even though their body did a full restoration. Now discovering that this was a flaw in their product, the group applied focused trial research on the matter. Due to the vegetative state of the suicidal subject, the group hid the body of the still alive person in the bottom of a bunker, while lying to the other test subjects that he had died. They also immediately implemented a new policy ban that no guns should be allowed at all in the lab. While this is not said, this can mean that the remaining 5 test subjects were no longer allowed outside the lab so that they continue to conduct further research on them. What is learned from this problem solving is that organs of the 6 do not regenerate if completely removed from the body, and that mental disorders occur when the brain is damaged even though the tissue successfully completes its repair process. Another flaw is acknowledged that the 6 were not invisible as they'd like, as suffocation, disease, and self-immolation could still afflict the 6. The goal of the group was to make sure a perfect immortal being is also healthy in both mind and body. I also feared that these results were found to implicate that they started to willingly harm the 6 to discover their vulnerabilities, to the point that the remaining 5 also turned to suicidal actions to escape their research. 4 years passed, and the discovered flaws had not been solved. Since the war had ended over a decade and a half ago, the group was running on fumes for supplies, funding, and most importantly, human subjects. In order to stabilize, the group had to make budget cuts. One means was to stop research and monitoring of the 158 that had grown normally despite their manipulated birth. However, this wasn't a simple forget them and let go. The record ominously states an appreciated honor for their sacrifice, and that it wasn't in vain of the research. While this lowered the need for monitoring power and resources, there was still a need for more human test subjects. Thus came the volunteering of researchers within the team, who decided they would utilize their own children as test subjects. Thanks to the budget cuts they had made earlier, they believed the project was still possible and agreed to manipulate the fertilization process of their very own next kin. Preparation for the next generation of test subjects meant changes for the group. In 1939, as World War II closes in on Earth's history, the group decided to relocate to a safer area that would isolate them away from any current or foreseeable military actions. The place was known as Lumia Island, an already inhabited piece of land which the group integrated themselves into. It was a place not suspicious enough to be deemed connected to the military, nor was it an exciting rural landmark. It is here that the group disguised themselves as a geological research center as their front to the public. While never brought up again in research records, I theorize and suspect that the original 6 test subjects were permanently dismembered so that their design flaw could be taken advantage of. And with that, they could be safely ditched and left hidden in the past. In 1978, the group directed their research efforts to a new project, nanotechnology, which was said to transfer memories from one person to another, but they still hadn't fully understood the machinations of the human brain. This difficulty frustrated senior researchers, while newer junior researchers hopelessly watched their superiors struggle. One junior researcher shared their experience of the work culture. This person often left the lab to take stress-relieving hour-long walks around the entire island. He became familiar with Lumia's inhabitants as he walked and saw that the demographic population was primarily the elderly that worked away at their self-sufficient resources. The young ones had moved off the island, looking to find their futures in the urban city. The junior commented that he would get warm and friendly interactions from the citizens, which was a slight comfort to his policy isolation. Researchers were not allowed to return home, and interacting with the inhabitants made him miss his family. Phones were a banned device for them, and the only way to have any touch with family was a controlled postage system to send letters. The junior also shared that they felt underqualified when compared to their seniors. The science in practice was an impossible hurdle, and they felt useless to push forward. This glimpse of the junior's life reflected the depressing atmosphere of the research group. The group soured, and hostilities rose. Just a year later, the director of the group was murdered because they showed no interest in further leading the research. No details are disclosed of the case. My theory of the speculation is that, considering the radicalism of the people involved, the passion eliminated those that prevented progress, and because the group as a whole was united in mindset as a majority, the opposition could be dealt with without dissolving the team in entirety. This doom and gloom changed in 1993, as a new director was appointed for the group. This was the daughter of two lead researchers that volunteered to have manipulated fertilization in 1932. Her name was Angelica. Due to her teenage appearance, to keep an authoritative face for the group, a trusted man named Orlando was put as her right-hand man, who made appearances for formal affairs. Angelica wasn't a puppet director. Her knowledge of biological sciences, as well as her quick ability to understand, made her an easily accepted director to the group. There is a side comment by Orlando in his own memos that he was surprised Angelica was willing when it was no knowledge that the last director was murdered. However, this was just a hint of Orlando's difference to Angelica. The director showed a forward light to the group as she aimed for bigger goals than just creating an immortal human body. In 1999, Angelica officialized the group to be known as a life science research institution known under the name of Aglia. However, this identity was kept private only to Angelica's plan. The group was still known to the public as the Geo-Focused Research Group. Angelica instead presented Aglia to a privatized meeting that invited international investors known for power, connection, and wealth. Angelica succeeded in convincing all who were invited, and thus forever pivoted the group towards her vision. However, just a couple days later, Orlando wrote one last message between him and Angelica. It was a small letter that Orlando could not agree to Angelica's decision on the basis of being unable to understand her vision, because he was mortal and she is immortal. His fear drove his disagreement, and with that fear he would part ways. The sentence is quoted, "I am sorry, Angelica. I guess this is the end." And this ends his research recording. I believe in my theory that Orlando committed suicide, staying true to his loyalty to the group's cause but unwilling to move forward. Orlando removed himself from the equation because he didn't want to sabotage the research project that he had dedicated his entire life to, and set aside his disagreement to keep the truths he knew all the way to his death. The only thing that follows Orlando's last message is Angelica's words that were recorded for herself. "May God light our way." On the first day of September, the year 2001, an announcement was broadcast to the entirety of Lumia Island. It was a report by the research group that in their 60 years of monitoring the Earth's crust, a grand phenomenon would occur in the near future. An undersea volcanic eruption was predicted, and if significant enough, it would cause a sinking earthquake that would cause total destruction of the land and submerge the rest of the land in its aftermath. Government assistance was requested for Lumia Island to prepare an order of evacuation so that the inhabitants of the island would be given safety. This, of course, was a front and a lie orchestrated by Aglia. This lie would be secured by the international investors who worked with Angelica to make the disappearance of Lumia Island a reality. The investors controlled not just airspace and sea lanes, but also the orbits of satellites in space. Because of all their collaborative efforts, Lumia Island seemingly disappeared from Earth, and the knowledge of its existence was kept to Aglia and those involved in the meeting of that fateful day. Within 5 years, Lumia Island was uninhibited in being transformed into Angelica's testing grounds. Cameras and microphones were installed throughout the island, and as well as removing any and all communication devices that were capable to communicate outside the island. These recording devices were to be used for Aglia's experimentation, a death game scenario that pits test subjects in a fight for survival, commonly termed a battle royale. These experiments will be structured and refined to the present day, and even though the last research record was canonically shared in February 2015, there were no signs of Aglaia stopping their research. With 24/7 surveillance, these experiments would be analyzed and recorded towards Angelica's evolved direction of the group's original goal, to discover what creates the perfect immortal soul. What creates the perfect human race. There we have it, the origin story of Aglaia and the machinations of Lumia Island. It's a dark and terrible background that pushes forward the manufactured ultimate human being, from child experimentation, underground dealings, falsification, and fanatical drives. Eternal Return harbors quite an evil history with seemingly unstoppable resources in power, money, and technology. There are a couple of plot holes discovered in bits and pieces, but I believe I had organized the origins of the game properly. There's no surprise that there may be some hiccups, as the writing of both games seem to have added some ideas and aspects along the way, instead of at the start. But the entire thing is cohesive, and can be pieced together very well, and we still have some important pieces of the puzzle before we get to the test subjects. See you next time, as I introduce the cellular structure of test subjects, and the blood that forces their vitals.